How you doing, guys? Let's talk to NBA. Right here, what you're looking at is my man, James Harden, MVP caliber player for the Houston Rockets. Kind of Kobe incarnated, I feel like, right? Kind of mirrors his game a lot after Kobe. Um, been in the hot seat, right, in the media these past couple of days. Hasn't been too good publicity for this man. Um, I guess he's used to it, right? James Harden has kind of always been a polarizing figure in the media. You either like him or you hate him. That it is what it is. You either like scoring or you don't, right? But the main thing that I want to talk about in this video is what really matters in this whole trade fiasco with Houston and other teams, and that's that what the outcome is. Right now, he's taking the hot seat. People bashing him publicly, saying he's not doing the right thing. That's really not up for debate. I kind of, it's a slippery slope with James Harden. I agree with some of the things he don't, and I agree with some of the things he does. But what really I want to talk about today is what really matters, and that is the outcome of this trade. Where he gets traded, will he win there? We saw with Kawhi Leonard, we saw with AD. It doesn't really matter how you get out of a situation. As long as you get out of a situation and immediately win, nobody cares. Nobody really cares that, AD Bogart his way out of New Orleans and told, Boston, hey, don't trade for me because if you do, I'm a rental, right? I'm going to LA, whether you like it or not. And Kawhi kind of doing the same thing, right? Went to Toronto, says I want to go to LA, gets traded to Toronto, sticks to his word, says I'm a 1 year rental, win the championship, gets heck out of Dodge, goes to Clippers, right? And I think that's the only thing that long term we look at is whether they win or not after this championship. So I'm gonna start looking at some teams, some potential trade options we've heard in the media, kind of some obvious, some not obvious places James Harden could get traded to, and talk about the likelihood, how that team would work, and really if he could follow in the footsteps of AD and Kawhi and win immediately after getting traded. So let's see. First off, we have the Miami Heat. So what we're looking at right now is my boy Bam Adebayo, probably my favorite player on the Miami Heat. And recently there's been a report saying that Miami Heat has been taken out of the trade talks with Houston. But do we really believe that? I mean, yes and no, but I think just for sake of talk, let's talk about something that could happen. And I think it's a pretty good deal. What I've seen so far is maybe Tyler Hero, some picks, some other assets for James Harden, and what that leaves is the core in Miami of Jimmy Butler, James Harden, probably as your front court, and Bam Adebayo, right? Their main three players on that team carrying the weight. From what we saw last year, how people view Miami is a decent regular season team, but a great playoff team. What I think where I get my opinion from the Miami Heat is kind of what Bill Simmons from The Ringer is. He says Miami Heat, they know who they are, right? And in the playoffs, when you're back against the wall, playing possession to possession, everything matters. The Miami Heat, they know who they are. Jimmy Butler knows what he can do. Bam Adebayo knows his role. You know, the coach knows what the scheme is, and they execute. And they're kind of a well-oiled machine when it comes to the playoffs, right? It's part of their culture. It's part of their identity. They execute, and when they execute, they go far. I mean, nobody really saw them. I didn't see them go into the NBA Finals and pushing the Lakers pretty hard. They really put the Lakers, at least in the beginning and the end of the season, when there's 2 games, they kind of push the Lakers to, hey, try with us. We're not just some push off that you can just kind of roll over and put all up. How the Lakers definitely did have to turn up and play against them. So where does James Harden fit in this team and this culture? I think this is the most interesting one, at least because James Harden is the complete opposite of the Pat Riley Miami Heat culture. He is the antithesis of Jimmy Butler, right? He is work hard, play hard. And Jimmy Butler is work hard and then work harder, right? I don't think Jimmy Butler has an off-season mode quite to the extent that James Harden does, and Bam Adebayo, in that sense as well. So, while I think that the Miami Heat would definitely benefit from this long term, does Pat Riley look at James Harden worthy as an investment and worthy as a return worth giving up Tyler Hero? And I know a lot of people, and especially Miami fans, overhype Tyler Hero, but I definitely, it's not for no reason, right? Fan bases, obviously overvalue their players more, but also that's kind of for a reason, right? I think Pat Riley is looking long term, looking at Tyler Hero and maybe some draft picks and some other assets as I would rather have that long term than dealing with James Harden, right? Kind of look how Jimmy Butler acted in Minnesota with the Timberwolves. I think if James Harden came over, it would just be that saga part two. Would they win? Yes, they would win. They would run the East. I mean, maybe they wouldn't be the greatest regular season team. Maybe Milwaukee would just kind of go out and win every game, but I can't imagine Miami with James Harden and Bam and Jimmy being less than a second seed, right? And they would definitely be the favorites going into the finals. But how long it would take for them to get to that point, I think is a major question. Their games, although great, James Harden and Jimmy Butler games don't mesh. James Harden is a polarizing figure. He's a ball hog, and Jimmy Butler, to a very lesser extent, does not do that. Jimmy Butler is a pass. Jimmy Butler is, you know, right play, right time. They're, as an organization, they are that. They are make the right play, not make the flashy play. So, would Miami be a destination that they would win in? Sure, but would they be a safe and comfortable and out of the media spotlight team? No, and I think Miami hates that. I think you know everybody there wants to keep that identity of we're a well-oiled machine. We're the Spurs, right? We're the Lakers. We make winning titles. And James Harden coming would help them win, but would only devalue and make that locker room a lot more toxic. So I think this is a great deal. I think Houston probably doesn't do this deal. I don't know. Tyler Hero and maybe some other players and some assets, but on the list of things that Houston wants, they don't want Tyler Hero, right? They want Ben Simmons, they want draft picks, they want long-term young success. They just don't want some up-and-coming player, right? And especially when you look at Tyler Hero, outside of the Eastern Conference, when he went to the finals, he didn't play that good, right? He got overshadowed, and he didn't play his role much like he did in the Eastern Conference Finals versus the Celtics. So whether Houston does it, I'm not a big believer in that, and especially with the media coming out today, it doesn't seem like that's a possibility. But I do think it's entertaining and definitely something interesting to look at when you consider the fact of who James Harden is and who Pat Riley's Heat are. They are complete opposites, and I think, honestly, it would be interesting and fun to see them get traded, but likelihood, probably not. Now, going on to our next team, the Brooklyn Nets. Next on the list is obviously the 76ers. Probably the most likely, the most possible, the most kind of makes sense pick. Um, as far as just like trading goes, right? I think Houston looks at Ben Simmons as probably the best asset you're gonna get, at least available, right? Ben Simmons is a All NBA talent. He is a maybe not now, but in a couple years, progressing to be a MVP caliber player, a defensively pristine player, right? I would not be surprised if he makes a defensive player of the year appearance in his career, right? I see him projecting to that level of talent. So James Harden for Ben Simmons, right now, value wise, you're losing on Houston's end, but I think that's the best asset you're gonna get. And Ben Simmons needs open space. He needs the LeBron James treatment, the Giannis treatment of roll to the basket, pass out, kind of pick and roll play that we see. And Houston has that. Houston was kind of running that with James Harden, right? Of dribble, 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 shoot, or dribble, 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 drive, layup. So I think Houston knows what they're doing when it comes to that, and I don't think people realize, or maybe Houston doesn't realize, right? Because they haven't made the deal yet, but that Ben Simmons is going to be not the only thing, like not only the best thing you're going to get on the market, but also the most likely and well chemistry wise player to mesh with what you already have established as far as Houston goes, right? I don't, with Mike, D'Antoni not being there, like, sure, you're not going to get the crazy trades, but I don't, it's in Houston's culture, at least the past couple of years, to find shooters and make shooters out of thin air, whether that's from the G League or trades or whatever the case is. They can find shooters, and especially they can tell shooters to sit there and just wait for the ball, right? They have no qualms telling players, sit there, look for the ball, shoot when you're open, right? And that's what Ben Simmons needs. Ben Simmons, with Joel Embiid, the main clash between their play styles is that Ben Simmons is a back to the basket. He is a post up. He is I'm in the middle, I'm in the paint player. And Ben Simmons thrives. He needs that to be open. He needs shooters around him. He needs the paint open for him to maximize his potential. Do I see the Sixers making this deal? Probably not. I think that with Mike D'Antoni being not Mike D'Antoni, Daryl Morey, that's what I meant. With Daryl Morey there and his past history with James Harden, I can't imagine he would trade. I don't think Daryl Morey is ready just to make Houston Part 2 in the East with Joel Embiid. So maybe the Sixers don't do it, but maybe the Sixers look at James Harden as, hey, he is an MVP caliber player. He is the best thing we're going to get as far as free agency goes. I mean, you look, who else is out there? Giannis just signed a deal. Anthony Davis signed a deal. Paul George. I expect Kawhi Leonard to sign a deal. I don't think anybody's coming to the Sixers on their own, at least without a trade. So I think they're probably looking at James Harden as probably the biggest thing they're going to get. And it seems like James Harden has interest there. It seems like James Harden, if he was there, kind of what AD did, he'd probably stay there, right? AD stayed at the Lakers when he got traded. I think James Harden would definitely probably stay at, Philadelphia if they win and they make a deep playoff run. I think James Harden, most of his value comes from the perimeter, and most of Joel Embiid's value comes from into the paint. So it would be definitely a your turn, my turn level of offense. But do I think James Harden and Joel Embiid and company is better than Joel, Ben Simmons and company? League's better. There's no competition. James Harden raises the ceiling and the floor of the Sixers more than Ben Simmons probably could do, and maybe in his whole career. I don't know. Do you value defense more than James Harden's offense? That's up to your personal preference, but this would work. And I think this is what 76ers are kind of valuing. They're trying to figure out, do I value Ben Simmons? Do I value the long-term progression of that? Or do I value getting the best asset I could get? And I'm honestly surprised that Houston doesn't just take this. Maybe Houston's probably thinking, I want picks. We know they gave up so much for Russell Westbrook in the deal last year. They're looking at this like, we want an asset and picks. Look what New Orleans got for AD. They got assets and picks. But I don't think 76ers, and I don't think it sucks that Houston in that place where they can't get what they want, but I think people realize James Harden isn't as coveted as an asset as he used to be, with him ruining his trade value, with him being a polarizing figure, and with him not being very nice in the media's eyes, right? He's kind of drifting towards Kyrie Irving and no longer kind of being a nice looked at figure in the NBA. So does this work? Yeah. Should it happen? Yeah. And I think both teams are kind of better off with this than without it. I think the 76ers, maybe they don't want to because they think Ben Simmons is a part of their culture and they don't want to disrespect their fans by trading that away. But I think they'd be better off with James Harden. They would be contenders in the East. And I also think that Houston isn't going to get anything better as far as assets go than Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons is going to be the best thing you're going to get besides, I don't know, the picks or whatever you think you could else get on the market as far as assets go. So on to the next team. Next up here is Brooklyn. Now, probably the second most likely destination for James Harden to go, but probably kind of, I think it's 50-50. I think, does it make sense for Brooklyn? Kinda, if they want to build a super team, if they want to guarantee success now, does it make sense for Houston? Does Karis LeVert and other assets, the kind of bench, you're basically giving the bench Brooklyn's depth for James Harden. I don't think Houston wants that. I think Brooklyn's probably going to have to give so many picks for them. And do they have them? I'm not too sure. But even if they did have them, would they be willing to give all that for James Harden? Maybe, maybe not. And maybe not if they're willing, but is Houston going to take that? No, I don't think they're going to take that, especially when, like I said, Ben Simmons could be on the table. They're not going to take Karis LeVert and company and maybe some picks for James Harden. Like I said, you look at what New Orleans got for AD. It's chump change, right? What New Orleans got from LA. So now, does this work? Does James Harden work with KD and Kyrie? I don't really think so. I mean, maybe it's not as toxic as Jimmy Butler would be because Jimmy Butler's probably going to call out his bullshit more. But KD and Kyrie are already kind of in the, bird's nest. They're cuckoos already. I'm just being silly, but, yeah, but seriously, they are kind of already, opinionated people. They already have their whole spiel in the media. So would James Harden come in there kind of be that big of a change? Maybe not. I don't think so. Um, James Harden kind of floats in that boat. He's that kind of player. He's, maybe he would mesh. I think it's a question of, do you think James Harden would get along, or do you think James Harden would kind of be pissed because maybe they're taking his role, right? Maybe they're kind of copying from what James Harden usually does. So maybe it work, maybe it doesn't. Honestly, I don't think Brooklyn does it. I think Brooklyn looks at their pregame, I mean their preseason games. They look at the first maybe quarter of the season and they're like, maybe we're cool with having the depth. Maybe KD is 80 to 90% of what he is. Kyrie makes a considerable improvement. Maybe kind of becomes a lot more long term, right? Maybe he can stay healthy for long term, and they're like, you know what, this works out. Let's see what we got. Because I think, kind of looking at what the Lakers are doing, they're seeing that a duo and depth is kind of how where this league is going, right? I don't think the league kind of is in that path anymore. I don't think it's the trend to be the big three. So maybe, maybe the Brooklyn doesn't. Maybe they don't vibe with it. Maybe they don't think that that's the best for them in the future. And I would agree with that. I think it would be great to see KD back with James Harden, and I think Kyrie and KD in the backcourt would be spectacular. But is that the best? Maybe not. I think it'd be cool. I think we all would love to see something like that, right? We all love to see big threes, but does this result in a better outcome than just keeping the depths? I don't think so. I think Brooklyn is going to be really good this year, and I think they're not willing to kind of uproot what they have, uproot their culture, and take a 180 in a different direction. I think they're kind of just coasting. I think Katie's going to be amazing. I think Kyrie's going to be amazing, and I don't think they're going to want to mess up a good thing, right? I don't think they're going to want to screw up and honestly want to have to deal with another drama queen coming into the Brooklyn Nets. I think they're content with KD and Kyrie. And then on to the last team. The next team, and honestly, my favorite as far as speculating goes, is the Golden State Warriors. I think the Golden State Warriors are not respected enough in this trade talks because it's probably not going to happen. I don't think the Warriors have the assets. I don't think Andrew Wiggins and maybe some picks or James Wiseman is gonna be enough. Maybe James Wiseman balls out and he's the center of the future. Maybe then, but I think what we have now, I don't think Houston is willing to give James Harden for that. But I think it's fun. I think it's something fun to think about because I think Warriors right now, this is what they need. They need kind of KD Part 2. With this core, bring in a MVP caliber player and run it back. I think if the Warriors were some way to pull this off, maybe James Wiseman becomes a really good player, then Houston looked at it and says, you know what, yeah, I would take Andrew Wiggins, James Wiseman, and maybe some protection on some picks, and say, you know what, yeah, I'll take that. It's not so far out of the reach as some might think, but this is what the Warriors need if they want to continue this level of play. If they want to get back there in the championship talk, if they want to, fill that new arena they built in San Francisco, this is the way to do it. And especially with Klay Thompson being injured, this is the best thing they're gonna get. This is the best thing on the table, and I think honestly, people would probably be like, "Man, fuck the Warriors. They just got KD, he's gone. Now they get James Harden." But you know what? I don't think James Harden is gonna raise the ceiling as much as KD did. KD just fits so well with the Warriors. They had a weakness in that wing spot. KD slipped in perfectly. James Harden doesn't. They already have their backcourt set out. So what would happen when Klay Thompson came back is you probably slip Klay Thompson to the three, right? So you have the backcourt of Steph and James, and then Klay, Draymond, and then I don't know, Kevin Looney, right? Whoever the case is. Honestly, at that point, you could have Kelly Oubre playing the center. Doesn't matter. I think their ceiling is set, and they would be a great team. They would be a contender for years to come, depending on how long. And I think that too is that James Harden is probably gonna resign. I think he would like being on that team, as much as the other ones, as much as Philly or Brooklyn. I think he looks at the Warriors, looks at a well-ran organization, and is like, man, I miss this. I never got this in Houston. I never got this in OKC, and he might like it. And I think I am hopeful maybe that James Harden would change his attitude and be more of a passing, more accompanied to that play style, around Steve Kerr, around Klay Thompson, around Steph Curry. I hope, and I think more likely than in Brooklyn, he would accept that role, seen as they're the Warriors. How can you deny their success? How can you say you know better than anybody there because they've gone out and done it. You got close, right, but you didn't finish. So I think this is interesting. I think this is fun. I don't think people are talking about it enough or as much as they should because I think the Warriors might have something up their sleeve, and I think people might be surprised especially if James Wiseman turns out to be a great prospect, a great asset to have alongside Andrew Wiggins. And Andrew Wiggins isn't what we thought he was on draft night, but that could make up a bulk of the money. I don't think Houston would scoff their nose at that as much as people think they would. Would they win? Yeah, given James Wiseman turns into a great valued prospect, this could happen, and honestly, I wouldn't be upset.